So this is what I want to talk about. How is this line a summation somehow of this very, very, rigid, poignant text, and possibly even the whole treatise itself? So I think about Matthew 26:31, this little story, this little anecdote. When Jesus is at the end of his life, he's with his disciples, with his friends, and he says to them, he delivers this news, this very night, you will all fall away on account of me. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I've risen, I'll go ahead of you into Galilee. And Peter replied, even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. I never will. Sounds good, doesn't it? Sounds loving. It sounds magnanimous. It sounds worshipful. Jesus replies, truly I tell you, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. And Peter, not to be dissuaded by Jesus's, irrevocable predictions, he declares, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. So it's not like he makes this bold proclamation, this oath. It's not like he swears and then Jesus says, actually, you're going to do it even tonight. And he sort of drops his head and said, okay, that sucks. I really thought I could make it more than a day. But actually, he comes back to Jesus and he says, I won't. Like, you're wrong. I won't do it. I mean, this is the kind of oath I think James is talking about. And it made me think of, I thought of that text in Matthew 26 because I'm reading Simone Weil's work. And it's taken me, by the way, I've read 392 books this year, and I still have not finished her book. So I started in January, and I'm still only on page 127. That's how hard it is to get through this book, how dense her book is. And this one line struck me, and it made me think of this. So this is her take on the denial of Peter. She says this: to say to Christ, I will never deny you, was to deny him already. For it was supposing the source of faithfulness to be himself and not grace. Can you just integrate that for a second? So, in other words, her point is, when Peter says, I will never deny you, he has already denied him. Because he is believing in that statement and in that moment in his own ability to keep that promise. He is making a proclamation about his own faithfulness, his own strength, his own moral courage, and denying grace. The denial doesn't happen later that night. The denial happens right there. She goes on to say, essentially, it was actually a really good and happy thing that he was quickly found out, that it only took a day for him to discover that it wasn't true, that he doesn't have the strength to keep that promise, that he should have never made the promise. And she goes on to say, how many others boast in the same way, and they never understand. To say, I will never, to think, I will never, to feel like I will never, and just fill in the blank for any moral, any spiritual, any matter of fidelity, belief or faith. And to say, I will never. To think, even if you don't say it, to think, I'll never do that. I'll never be like that person, or I'll never make that mistake. To feel even. Maybe you don't say it, maybe you don't go so far as to think it, but you actually feel you wouldn't do that. Other people might make that mistake. Other people might fail in that way, but you wouldn't. Is to be the kind of person, I think, to think that way, is to be the kind of person that James is calling the rich. It is to harbor in yourself a faith in yourself. It is to set yourself up for judgment because you are someone who stands tall in this world and who can be believed and who can be counted on. And when you say a thing, it happens. This is what we lionize. These are the people that we make our heroes, these titans of industry who said they would do a thing and did it. These bastions of virtue, these beacons of goodness are tycoons. And these kind of promises are built on faith in ourselves. They are songs of worship to the idol of our own strength. This is why James is saying, above all, never do that. And in the ancient world, what's interesting about this, you do a little bit of looking into, a little bit of study, and you see in the ancient world, these kind of oaths, sort of make these big statements, these big proclamations. It's not like, hey, you're going to come to my party. Yeah, I'll be there. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about a big statement like, wild horses couldn't keep me away. It's just trying to make some big, like, I will 100%, you can count on me. I will always do what I say I'm going to do. They were always attached to some kind of, oaths always came with what Craig Keener calls a self-curse. So it would be something where you would say something like, may I die if I don't fulfill this thing. We still have, cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. Has anyone ever heard that? Cross my heart, hope to die. Are we taking this too far? Yes, we're taking this too far. Why do we need to say that? Why would you say that? And why? Who has the courage, the belief, the self-belief to say, I'd rather die. I'd rather stick a needle in my own eyeball than break this. I will do this thing I'm saying. That's how much you can count on me, on my fidelity. People still say that I swear on my children. I swear on my mother's grave. I swear these are life and death oaths that we still feel the need to make. These big, kind of earth-shattering life and death statements. It's interesting because the very next line in Matthew 26, after Peter says, even if I have to die, I will never deny you. And the very next line is, he takes his disciples to Gethsemane. And there in Gethsemane, he goes to pray, and they can't even stay awake with him. So these great promises of fidelity and solidarity that Peter will have will be gone in an hour. And that great line where Jesus says after that, like, could you not watch with me for 1 hour? God, I knew you were going to deny me, but you couldn't even pray with me for 1 hour? That's what we're dealing with? And then that great line where Jesus says, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And the recognition that Jesus has in the weakness in his disciples and the grace that's already there, kind of in the background in the story, the buzz in the background of the story is, I already know you're like this. I already know you're not going to do these oaths that you're promising. But at the same time, I'm still with you. I still love you. We're still going to get there together. He's not bitter at their weakness. He accepts it somehow. That night, Peter's strength would fail. And this is why I think James can say this line, above all, don't do that. Attaching life and death to our own strength to our own power, to our own will working in the world. And this beautiful juxtaposition of the saints, the people who just persevere, the people who just wait, the people who don't make big promises about we're going to do this or we're going to do that, or we'll be here next year, we'll be there next year. The people who simply wait on the harvest. It's a different kind of strength, actually. It's a different kind of hero. Unseen and unsung. These people are patient. They're poor in spirit. They're humble in heart. They walk in the world differently. And this is the juxtaposition. It's not just between believer and unbeliever. It's between a certain kind of person that sees the world in a certain way, that believes in themselves, and a person that has no belief in themselves, but believes only in the one that will come again, the one who owns the farm, the one that will see to all the misdeeds and all the injustice. It doesn't trust in themselves at all. It makes no promises based on their own strength because they understand essentially and quintessentially they are weak. So they're patient. So the saints, according to James, they're patient, but they hope and they try and they pray. The very next line that will come after this text in 13 is, are you in trouble? Is anyone in trouble? You ought to pray. So what the saints do is not make oaths, but the saints pray. And this again is an incredible comparison. To side by side look at making an oath. You can count on me, I will do this. And to say, I will pray. Compare those two things side by side. Peter should have said, if I could make a correction, I think Peter should have said, without your help, I certainly will deny you. But I want to be faithful. I'll try to be faithful. I hope to be faithful. I will pray to be faithful. Can you just see the difference? Can you not see the difference in the fundamental fabric of the two kinds of people that James is presenting to us? The kind of person that sees himself essentially as someone who will fail, but can try, can pray, can hope, can rely somehow on the grace and goodness of God for themselves, versus somebody that can say, I'll do it 100%. I'll stake my life on it. The first time I ever really read this text, I was 19. I'm sure I'd seen it or scanned over it. And at the time, some of you know this story. As a young man from like 15, 16 on, I had this one Bible. And back in the day, we would underline our Bibles. Anyone remember actual Bibles? And if you were very spiritual, you underlined your Bible. And you made notes and so on. And you could open your Bible and people could see just how spiritual you are. Look at every page. And it got to that point. By the time I was about 18, 19, almost every page of my Bible, certainly the New Testament, was just completely underlined, completely notated. The pages were coming out. It was just because I tried to read the Bible every day, and I would always make little notes and so on. And I can remember being a sophomore in college and stumbling on. Well, no, actually, I was in a class that had a big impact on my life and my worldview. It's called Religion of Latin America, and we were talking about a certain kind of theology, and there was a reference to James 5. And so I was like, I should take a look at that again. So I went back into my Bible, and when you know it, all of James was underlined except for those lines. It's just untouched. And that was a big moment for me because I realized a couple of things. Number one, I realized that I'm capable of these incredible blind spots, that you can just miss something in the Bible. You can read the Bible over and over again and just never think that part applies to you. And maybe those are the most important parts. The lines that just don't strike you, the lines that don't seem interesting, the lines that don't reinforce your own way of looking at yourself, or your own understanding of yourself. And so it struck me pretty hard. And of course, a lot of what we were talking about in that course was, well, at least on that section, had to do with the poor. And what I came to understand was like this idea of the preferential option for the poor, that God actually favors the poor. And that became a very watershed moment in my life theologically, both to recognize that I have to watch out for my own blind spots, my own inability to see something, because I come from a culture, and I come from a majority culture and a majority people. But then also to recognize that these texts are very important to the formation of what would be real biblical theology, and it was a powerful lesson, obviously, in the text we overlook, but it changed the whole direction of my life. In fact, the next Bible study I led, I was a student leader, so the next Bible study I led, I said, we're going to do the book of James. So we did the book of James, and then when we came to I don't know, there's about 20 of us in this Bible study, and when we came to James 5, it was just like the Holy Spirit fell on the group, and we were all just deeply repentant and realized we come from a wealthy country and a wealthy people, and how do we begin to try to get on a journey of walking in solidarity with the poor. And that same week, I saw something on TV. Some of you may have heard this story, but I saw something on TV where there's just this Christian guy who was had a mission in Haiti, and he was come out and visit us and sponsor a kid. It was like a sponsorship program. And he said at the end of the commercial, he was like, come and visit us. And I was like, okay. So I went back to my Bible study. I was like, I think this guy told us we could come visit him. It was on the TV. He didn't say it to me personally, but I'll make some calls. So it's just us, no adults. I mean, I guess we were adults. And I called the guy. I somehow got their number. I called him. I said, look, your thing said we could come. I have 20 people. We're coming. So on that spring break, we bought a bunch of plane tickets. I was a part of InterVarsity at the time. And the InterVarsity staff was like, you're doing what? And who's going? And who? And I'm like, it's not InterVarsity. Don't worry about it. You don't have any liability problems or whatever. He was very nervous about it, as he should have been. But we just went. And that was my first encounter with, the developing world, with, what we'd have to say is real economic poverty. And of course, the rest is history. It crippled me emotionally and theologically in such a way that I had to try to figure out a way to live in the light of those realities, and try my best to remain aware and conscious of those things. But I tell you that story for this reason. I think that a part of what happened, and this is just in recent reflection, I think a part of what happened and what can happen in those situations is that actually to sort of decide to recognize something so profoundly, and then to decide I have to walk in solidarity with the poor, itself became a kind of oath for me. That it did the exact opposite thing of what I think James wants it to do. That it became a thing where I said, I'll never have this kind of church. I will never use money in this way. I will never be a part of a system that oppresses people. I will always live this way. Now, some of that, maybe I wouldn't have said that publicly, or I wouldn't have run around making those kind of statements, but I promise you that's what was going on inside my head. That even those true sentiments of wanting something, but turning it into some kind of ambition, building it on your own ability to keep that promise, to your own faithfulness, is always wrong. And it probably was, a mistake I made even then. When I should have said, and maybe what I've learned to say slowly over the years, is, Lord, with your help or without your help, I will forget the poor. Help me remember. Which, of course, if that's your posture, if that's your belief, that this is a critical thing, and I am the kind of person that will forget, that will fail, will sink back into comfort or sink back into my own self-interest. And because I'm that kind of person, I have to pray. I have to believe somehow in His grace that though I am faithless, He remains faithful. And that is my only hope in this life and the one to come, is His grace. Even over these things which feel very much like convictions, and convictions which very much feel like they deserve bold proclamations of my own resolve. Do you see what I mean? It's such a subtle thing. We admire it. In fact, to hear Peter say, "Not me, I won't do it." There's a part of me that goes, "Hell yeah!" You're just sitting there going, "That's my dog, Peter." Like he's saying, "I'm not doing that." But he's the villain in the story. Do you see what I'm saying? And if Simone Weil's right, that is the betrayal. The statement itself is the denial. And look at what the rich do. The rich hoard and they hold things for themselves instead of giving them away. They store things too long. They save for that rainy day that never comes. They protect themselves, but in the end have only themselves as their protector. Rot, corrosion, hoarding. I told Monica I was going to throw her under the bus about hoarding, but she didn't come, so I'm not going to. Any hoarders here? Well, you can confess to God. Dishonest business practices, luxury and indulgence, self-indulgence, false judgment on others. I mean, the only thing that I have not done clearly in this story, the only thing I have not failed, like clearly and totally and utterly, is I have never murdered a person. So that's it. That's the rest of it. I have to do some soul searching. Of course, Jesus said, if you say you hate your brother, you are murdering him. So even that, I probably don't pass muster. All of these things, over time, I think, have led me to realize my own weakness, my own inability to keep the convictions I feel. And if you can stomach it, it will allow you to be a certain kind of person that continues to hold those convictions, but understands in humility your own weakness alongside them. Now, some people, when they fail in those moral convictions, simply give up the moral convictions so they can continue to see themselves as heroic. Do you understand? That is the coward's way out. To simply say, well, I don't know if I believe that anymore. I don't know. Let's just take a sexual ethic, for example. How many people have I seen take on purity as a conviction and a cause of something they believe in until they don't want to be pure anymore? Until they want to fulfill their own sexual desires in whatever deviant ways that manifests inside of them. And it manifests in us in all lots of different cool, different, unique ways. But whatever that thing that manifests, then suddenly they don't believe that anymore. It's the coward's way out to say, well, I don't actually think that's true or necessary anymore, so I can remain the hero of my own story. I haven't betrayed anything. I haven't failed at anything. Instead, the real courage is to say, yeah, I still believe in that. I just am not good at keeping it. I'm the problem. And so I rely on the grace of God, which is all we ever could do. The only chance we ever had. This is why the very next text is about prayer. If any of you is in trouble, he should pray. Let them pray. And the one before about saying we shouldn't say we'll go here or go there. Because praying people, listen very carefully, praying people who pray, people who respond to their life and their world through prayer, don't really know what's going to happen next. They can't say for sure. Praying people are humbled people because praying always puts the ball in God's court. And to pray is to essentially say, Lord, I really hope you do something because ultimately it's up to you. And listen, ambitious people, rich people, whatever category we want to create here, don't pray. Don't pray. They live a prayerless life. Now they can still believe in Jesus. They can still have a Christian worldview. They can still operate as a Christian operator in the world, but they're not really praying. They're not prayerful people, because prayerful people are humbled by prayer. Prayer is a humbling experience. It's to put all of your cards in that basket. It's to say, ultimately, Lord, you have to do it because I can't. That's why we pray. And some people only pray when they find themselves totally powerless, right? A cancer diagnosis. Then you pray. You know what I mean? But the truth is, just as powerless as you feel towards something like that is the way we should feel, we can feel toward everything in our lives. These kind of rich people he's talking about are proud and self-sufficient. They don't pray. They work for their own outcomes. They control and hold and own and die alone. So I want to leave you with this last kind of just cognitive model, paradigm for you. I want to make a distinction between, and I've already kind of alluded to it, but I want to make a distinction which I think is helpful. This came up recently in something I read, and then I had a conversation with someone else who was going through something, and I thought, you know what, this is what's happening. And so let me paint the picture this way. We have inside of us a way to come at the world, which is either through ambition or through aspiration. Ambition or aspiration. And so I want to set those up as a comparison today, because I think it's what I think ultimately is coming out of this text. Ambition or aspiration. Ambitions are underwritten by our own strength and our own ability. Aspirations are things that are beyond us. Can you already feel the difference? An ambition is underwritten by my own strength, my own ability, my own skills, my own competency. An aspiration is already by design a thing that is beyond me. Ambition is often just about getting something or achieving something. It's about accomplishment. Ambition is a commitment to a goal or an outcome, no matter the cost, and without regard to the impact on yourself or others. Ambition is what drives the rich in the beginning of this text. Aspiration, on the other hand, is a commitment to the person we want to be. It is a reaching, actually. Aspiration is about becoming someone. It is a reaching for him that we imitate. Aspiration is an act of. Ambition is external. Aspiration is internal. I have this friend, this German friend, who I met some years ago at a economic forum that I was part of in Switzerland, I think is where it was. And what a guy! He's just a little quirky, and he's kind of a little business genius, and he owns and runs 25 companies. Wrap your head around. So he is the CEO of 25 companies. Okay, he's a little short, little Energizer Bunny German guy. He's funny. He's a little weird. He's excellent. I love him. He's like if I was a short German, slightly younger version of myself, this is what I'd like to be. His name is Chris. And I saw Chris recently. So I was at this other forum in San Diego. And so it's rich people. It's a lot of Christian rich people that are there. So now I'm by the way, I sometimes now walk in these worlds now with my relationship with the foundation and going to something like the Christian Economic Forum, which is where I saw him most recently. Chris was there. We caught up. I just really like him. You know, something about him that I like. It's not just because he's a little entrepreneur, tycoon, whatever. It's because there's something about his faith that I like. He also has dabbled in real estate, and he dabbles in microchurch. So we've had a conversation about that, because he tried to get he built all these apartment complexes, and he tried to put in Germany, and he tried to put microchurches in all of them. So he's a ministry guy too. He's a really cool dude. Anyway, he tells me recently, I was like, "What's going on, Chris?" And he just has this ability. He's very German, so has this ability to give me, in the next 4 minutes, he's going to tell me the seminal things that have happened in the last 12 months in his life. And so he tells me the story of going to the Louvre. He starts with Brian, I went to the Louvre. And you know, the Louvre in Paris, great art museum, you could be there. Anyway, Mona Lisa's in the Louvre. That's probably, anyway, it's a cachet of world-class art. The Louvre has to be the greatest or one of the greatest art collections in the world. And he said, Brian, I think I set the record for the fastest time in the Louvre. He said, I timed myself and it took me 12 minutes to run. He said, once I got in, I ran to the Mona Lisa. Has anyone ever been there? The Mona Lisa is very small, by the way. It's about that big. And so you have, and it's a room like maybe this size, and it'll be over there where the underground sign is. And like, it just has a group of people around it. And it's very underwhelming. If you've been to the Mona Lisa, it's very underwhelming. You're kind of like, okay, cool. Take a picture. You try to like it, but you don't really understand what's going on. So he said, I ran 12 minutes. He said, I think I probably broke the record for the least amount of time in the Louvre. But I ran as fast as I could. I saw it. I said, okay, I've seen it. And I left. And he's like, I started reflecting on that. And he started thinking about his own life. And he started thinking, basically, the conclusion he came to is, what's wrong with me? Like, there's something very wrong with me. That I just ran past some of the most extraordinary pieces of human accomplishment, in the last 1,000 years, and I couldn't see any of it because I had to get this done. I wanted to achieve this and get out. I wanted to say I saw the Mona Lisa. I just want to see the Mona Lisa and leave. That's all he wanted, and he wanted to achieve it. Right? He had made for himself an ambition. I'm going to say I saw the Mona Lisa and I'm going to get out of here because who cares? And he's like, Brian, I don't get it. I don't get what people see in art. I don't know what the point is. I don't know. Who cares? I saw it. What's the point? I got to get back to work. I want to get back to my businesses. Does anybody relate to this guy, by the way? Just no interest whatsoever in art. Doesn't get it. Doesn't get the point. But starts reflecting on himself. This is what I love about Chris. So he's like, Brian, something's wrong with me. And I knew something was wrong with me. Why can't I appreciate art? What is it that everyone sees that I cannot see? So, a very Chris thing, he decides to enroll in a master's degree in art appreciation at Oxford. So by the way, you don't just enroll in anyway, somehow he gets into immediately he recognizes this flaw in himself and says, I got to figure out what it is that people, how do you appreciate art? So he doesn't just like read a book. Actually, he read 70 books, but I'll get to that in a second. But he goes, I'm going to go take a course. So he goes for a master's degree and again, this is like 12 months since I saw him. And so he enrolls in a master's degree at Oxford in art appreciation. And he's like, Brian, I just had to figure it out. I had to figure out what am I missing? And so he said, I started to learn. I started to see, okay, this is what people understand. Anyway, he eventually bumps into the story of the Medici family in Italy, which is a fascinating story. They sort of were the original bankers. They pioneered modern banking, with lending and interest, and you'd be able to start a business by borrowing some money and being able to do something like buy a home, those kind of things. That's all the Medici family. And the Medicis were Christian. And actually, Facundo, I don't remember, the patriarch, Medici, he had these principles about art. He had this belief that they needed to take their money, their wealth that they were making, which is immense, enormous, and they needed to fund art. So the Renaissance, ever heard of it? That's all Medici money. So you can figure out who paid these people to paint the Sistine Chapel or whatever. Somebody paid for that, right? There was a patron behind. All great art has a patron. And that's almost all that is Medici money. So he found himself as a person who was trying to be a good steward of wealth and understand that and to give money away and all that and run these companies and so on. But then also recognizing his own weakness and his inability to see something. And he goes on this learning journey. And then, of course, he starts a new company. He starts a nonprofit, essentially, about teaching CEOs the kind of Medici way. Like how to give away their money, how to support not just art, but anything that brings creative beauty in the world, whatever. What a guy. But what I love about Chris, and the reason why he came to my heart and my mind, is because this is about, for Chris, his life is being driven not by ambition, but by aspiration. See, aspiration opens you up to where you're weak and what you don't know. Aspiration says, I should be better. I should be more. I want to be better and be more. A long time ago, he stopped caring about money. Wanting more money, needing more money. It's just not, you can just see in his eyes, it doesn't drive him. But something like learning, appreciating something, understanding something, and passing that on to others, that's aspiration. Ambition would drive him to just build his companies and make more money. Aspiration sends him back to school. Ambition is about what you've achieved. Aspiration is about what you'll become. I'm not saying there's not a place for ambition in our lives, but if it's unchecked by aspiration, listen to me, if it's unchecked by aspiration, it will consume you and it will ruin you. The way Jesus put it, what profits a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? And this is the point here, I think, from James. There are people who live in luxury and who look successful, who've achieved a lot in business or wealth, who are themselves bankrupt and under God's impending condemnation. Ambition fattens you for the day of slaughter. Aspiration prepares you for the day of redemption. Ambition makes you impatient and even cruel. Aspiration teaches you patience and endurance. Ambition makes oaths. Aspiration prays prayers. Did you notice that there's a beatitude in here, in this text? We say, this thing we say, that blessed are those who endure. This is another beatitude to add to Jesus's. Blessed are those who endure. And enduring itself is an aspiration. To want to make it to the end is an aspiration. To become rich is an ambition. To want to be rich is an ambition. But to become godly is an aspiration. To make oaths is about ambition, and it sets God aside, and it makes a goal your God. By the way, I'm very goal-oriented. Those of you that know me well know I completely live my life based on goals I set. Goals I set on a quarterly basis and goals I set on a daily basis, actually. This is how I completely order and structure my life. And yet I am learning, partly because I am the father of an addict. I am also learning that you just cannot, the future doesn't belong to us. And so you hold those things very loosely. Because ultimately, there are things I want to try to accomplish, but there's the person I want to be. And even all the little things I set up as goals or little ambitions you have, ultimately should only serve your aspirations to become someone. I'll close with this. I don't know if you want to come up, Sam wants to come on. It's up to you. Like your boots. To run a marathon is an ambition. To say I want to run a marathon. But really ask yourself, because we've all thought that thought, right? I think I'm gonna try to run a marathon. I mean, some of you may. Adrian's like, no, I never thought that thought. But if you do, if you entertain that thought, if you really think about it, it's not that you want to run a marathon. It's that you want to be a certain kind of person, right? You want to be a person who's, I don't know, self-disciplined, or a person who's healthy, or a person who's in shape, or a person that eats right, a person that exercises daily commitment to a disciplined goal. So even that, beware of these ambitions we set up for ourselves that become little idols in our lives, when really the thing you're aspiring to is more important. Who is it you want to be, not what is it you want to do? And ultimately to recognize that we're weak people. We won't do anything apart from the grace of God. We won't accomplish anything apart from the grace of God. It might seem a little odd, but I want to just close with this one thought, this one idea. because I was having a conversation. I am really loving, he's not in here, but Skylar's 15. I'm really loving my relationship with him right now, because he's getting to the point where he can sort of keep up with me intellectually and theologically. And so it's just opened up all new worlds of discussion and discipleship and friendship even between he and I. I love it. We had a conversation recently about someone we both know who's making some choices which are really hard to watch and really harmful to others. And we were processing, as we do, these deep, long talks that we have about these things. And it led me to a point of thinking about, what really is going wrong with him from my perspective, limited as it is. But, I'm an old head now, so I've seen it before. Is that, and this is what I said to him, I'm like, really, Skylar, I think the problem with him is that he doesn't know his own heart. This is a problem men have, it's a problem women have, it's a problem we all have, where you're reacting to the world because you feel something. But you're not aware of what you're feeling. You're not perceiving your own heart, your own motives, your own woundedness, your own sadness, your own fear. Someone said it earlier, why would rich people do this? Why would they hoard wealth and make people starve while they get nothing out of it? Why do that? Maybe it's fear. And what really goes down to any Christian that finds themselves acting like these people, it's because something's going on inside your heart. Something's going on inside your own emotional life that you're not aware of. That you just, for whatever reason, can't see or won't pay attention to. There's actually a thing called alexithymia, which is a condition. It's also called emotional blindness. It's actually the inability of a person to perceive or understand their own emotion. So they're feeling scared, and so they act upon the world, but they can't recognize that what's happening is I'm scared. And can you see how important that would be? If you're reacting to someone, or you're acting in a certain way, or you're putting something aside, or you're hiding something, or you're chasing after something, but it's really because you're afraid, or it's really because you feel unworthy, or it's really because you're angry, or it's really because of some unfilled need that you have from another relationship or whatever, that to not be able to see that is to kind of set you on a path that you become a victim of your own blindness, of your own emotional blindness. And I'm just going to say this right now. I think a lot of us in this room have this problem. Like at some level. I've had enough conversations with enough of you to know what are you feeling right now, is not at the tip of your tongue. And when we're really driven to do something, to react to the world in a certain way, we often have no idea what is driving that emotionally. And it's something I've been thinking about and working on for years, but I just feel like the pathos of our lives is way more important than we give it credit for, and possibly even more important than the rational part of our lives and minds. We undermine it, we undervalue it, we pretend like it isn't real because we think we're super rational. We think that to be a Christian is to believe something, to think something. And to be a good Christian is not to worry about emotions or not to have emotions. And what that does is that just sets us up as being kind of disabled in our life, in our experience with others, and the way we react to the world. So I want to just, as we come to the table, I guess I just want to make that request of you, like to ask God to help you know your own heart, to see your own emotional blindness. Look, who am I to psychoanalyze the Apostle Peter, but I feel like brother had some emotional blindness. This is part of the problem. Why do we make oaths? Why say, I'm on my mother's grave, why? Why do that? What are you overcompensating for? And what does it mean to be a person that just says yes or no? To understand yourself, I think, is a big part of that. To know your own heart, to become aware of your own feelings. So much of the evil we do in the world is because it's coming out of evil done to us, or it's coming out of hurt or pain or insecurity or the sort of pathos inside of us. and to at least be able to see it, makes it then something that can become a matter for prayer. And it can become a matter of weakness. It becomes another piece of data to come back to you to say, aren't I sort of a sad, pathetic person, you know? And this is good stuff for the Christian life. This is the fabric of understanding where sin abounds, grace abounds more. Where there is weakness, there is strength. And without weakness, there is no strength. Without understanding your weakness, the power of God cannot be revealed in you. This is Paul's point. How is the power of God fully realized in our lives? To the degree to which we understand our own inadequacies, our own shortfalls. It's not something to be afraid of. It's not something to hide. It's something to own so that you can see the grace of God and the goodness of God and the power of God come alive in you. To see our own weakness, to understand our own fears, to understand our own darkness, even in our own hearts, leads us to the place of aspiration. It makes us people who pray and who wait patiently for the person we hope to be. And we rely more on the grace of God.